Scientists just cracked open ancient bones in Colombia and found DNA from people who shouldn't exist. Not descendants of any known group, not ancestors of anyone alive today. A completely separate branch of humanity that lived, thrived, and then vanished so completely that until 48 hours ago, we had no idea they ever walked the earth. This isn't some fringe theory. This is hard genetic evidence published in Science Advances showing that 6,000 years ago, a mysterious population of hunter-gatherers settled in the mountains of Colombia. They lived there for 4,000 years, 4 millennia. That's longer than the entire history of ancient Egypt. And then, around 2,000 years ago, they disappeared. Not their culture, not their cities, their entire genetic lineage, gone. Think about what that means. Every Native American population we've studied, from Alaska to Tierra del Fuego, shows genetic connections to other groups. Even tiny isolated tribes in the Amazon share DNA markers with their neighbors. But these Colombian highlanders? Nothing. Zero matches. They're what scientists are calling a ghost population, and they're forcing us to completely rethink how humans first settled the Americas. The discovery came from 21 ancient skeletons found at 5 different sites around Bogotá. The oldest bones date back 6,000 years from a place called Checua, perched 3,000 meters up in the Andes. When researchers extracted DNA from these remains, they expected to find the usual patterns. Maybe some connection to groups in Peru. Perhaps links to Central American populations. What they found instead was a genetic signature that exists nowhere else on Earth. Kim Louise Kredick from the University of Tübingen, who led the study, couldn't believe what she was seeing. These people represented what geneticists call a basal lineage, meaning they branched off from the very first South Americans and then stayed completely isolated. For 4,000 years, they hunted and gathered in their mountain refuge, developing their own unique genetic markers, their own identity written in DNA. But then something happened. Around 2,000 years ago, new people arrived from the north. These newcomers brought pottery, agriculture, and genes that matched populations in Panama and Costa Rica. Within a few generations, the original inhabitants were gone, not absorbed, not mixed, completely replaced. André Luis Campelo dos Santos from Florida Atlantic University, an archaeologist not involved in the study, summed up everyone's reaction perfectly. Up to this point, we didn't believe there was any other lineage that would appear in South America. This is unexpected. To understand why this matters so much, we need to step back and look at the bigger picture. For decades, the story of how humans populated the Americas seemed straightforward. Groups crossed from Asia over the Bering Land Bridge maybe 16,000 years ago, spread south through an ice-free corridor, and gradually filled both continents. Simple, clean, wrong. This Colombian discovery adds to a growing pile of evidence that the real story was far messier. Remember, Colombia sits at the bottleneck between Central and South America. Every human who ever walked into South America had to pass through this region. Yet somehow one group arrived, settled in the highlands, and remained genetically isolated for 4 millennia, while the rest of South America filled up with other populations. The research team used cutting-edge techniques to extract DNA from the densest parts of the skull and from teeth, where genetic material survives best in tropical conditions. They then compared these ancient genomes to databases containing thousands of DNA samples from indigenous peoples across the Americas. The statistical analysis was mind-boggling in its complexity. F for statistics, admixture graphs, multidimensional scaling. Every test pointed to the same conclusion. These people were genetic outliers who left no descendants. What makes this even more remarkable is how common population continuity usually is in South America. In Peru, ancient DNA shows that modern indigenous peoples are directly descended from populations that lived there 5,000 years ago. Same story in Chile, Brazil, even the Amazon. But in Colombia, complete discontinuity, total replacement. The timing of this population turnover gives us some clues about what might have happened. 2,000 years ago was a period of massive change across the Americas. In Central America, complex societies were developing. Trade networks stretched from Mexico to Peru. New crops like improved varieties of maize were spreading rapidly. And apparently people were moving too. The newcomers who replaced the ghost population brought more than just different genes. They introduced pottery making to the Colombian highlands. They brought new agricultural techniques. They spoke languages from the Chibchan family, which still survive today in parts of Central America and Colombia. Essentially, they brought an entire cultural package that completely transformed the region. But what happened to the original inhabitants? This is where the mystery deepens. There's no evidence of warfare, no mass graves, no signs of epidemic disease. They simply fade from the genetic record. One generation they're there, the next they're gone. Several theories could explain their disappearance. Maybe they were absorbed into the incoming population through intermarriage. Their genes diluted over time until no trace remained. But the genetic analysis suggests otherwise. The replacement was too complete, too sudden. Another possibility is disease. New populations often carry pathogens that devastate groups with no immunity. We saw this tragically when Europeans arrived in the Americas. Could something similar have happened 2,000 years ago? Environmental change might also have played a role. The Colombian highlands experience periodic droughts that can devastate hunter-gatherer populations. If the ghost population was already stressed by climate change, the arrival of agricultural peoples with more stable food supplies might have sealed their fate. What's fascinating is that this isn't the first ghost population scientists have discovered through ancient DNA. A few years ago, researchers found that some Amazonian peoples carry genetic signatures from a mysterious group they called Population Y. This phantom population showed weird connections to indigenous Australians and Papuans, suggesting an early migration to the Americas that we're only beginning to understand. In North America, the famous Kennewick man skeleton revealed genetic patterns that don't match modern Native Americans. In the Arctic, an entire culture called the Paleo-Eskimos lived for 4,000 years before being replaced by the ancestors of today's Inuit. Each discovery adds another layer of complexity to human prehistory. But the Colombian case is unique because of its completeness. This wasn't a small group that got absorbed or a remote population that died out. This was a successful lineage that controlled prime real estate or at the crossroads of two continents for 4,000 years, then vanished without a genetic trace. The discovery has massive implications for understanding early American settlement. If such a distinct population could exist undetected in Colombia, how many other ghost lineages are waiting to be discovered? Every mountain range, every isolated valley could hide evidence of lost peoples who contributed nothing to the modern gene pool. Think about what this means for human evolution more broadly. We tend to imagine evolution as a tree, with branches splitting but continuing to grow. What the Colombian discovery shows is that many branches simply ended. Dead ends, evolutionary experiments that ran for thousands of years before terminating. How many human stories have we lost? How many unique cultures developed, flourished, and disappeared without leaving any record except fragments of DNA in ancient bones? The research team worked closely with the Muisca people, modern indigenous inhabitants of the Colombian highlands, who are descended from the population that replaced the ghost lineage. It's a delicate situation. These scientific findings don't diminish the Muisca's connection to their land or their cultural heritage. If anything, they add another layer to the deep history of human occupation in the region. Cosimo Posch, senior author of the study, emphasized that genetic ancestry should never be confused with cultural identity. The Muisca and other indigenous peoples of Colombia have rich traditions stretching back thousands of years. The fact that they are not genetically descended from the very first inhabitants doesn't change that. But it does complicate our understanding of indigeneity and deep history. If populations can be completely replaced, what does it mean to be indigenous? How far back do you have to go? These are questions without easy answers, and they become more complex with each new ancient DNA discovery. The technology that made this discovery possible is truly remarkable. 20 years ago, extracting DNA from 6,000-year-old bones in a tropical environment would have been impossible. The heat and humidity destroy genetic material rapidly, but new techniques allow scientists to target the densest parts of bones where DNA survives longest. They can amplify tiny fragments and piece together entire genomes from what would have been useless material just a decade ago. This technological revolution is transforming archaeology. Instead of just studying pottery and stone tools, researchers can now directly examine the people who made them. They can trace migrations, identify family relationships, even determine what diseases ancient populations suffered from. It's like having a time machine that lets us meet our ancestors face to face. Well, most of our ancestors. The Colombian ghost population reminds us that not every ancient human contributed to the modern gene pool. Their ancestors to no one. Yet their story might be more common than we think. How many populations rose and fell without leaving descendants? How many human experiments ended in extinction? In Europe, ancient DNA has revealed multiple population turnovers. The farmers who built Stonehenge were largely replaced by nomadic peoples from the steppes. In turn, those nomads were mixed with and partly replaced by later migrations. Each wave left some genetic legacy, but many individual lineages disappeared completely. The same pattern probably played out across the world. In Africa, mysterious ghost populations contributed DNA to modern peoples, but left no pure descendants. In Asia, the Denisovans and other archaic humans added their genes to our ancestors before disappearing. Even our own species, Homo sapiens, apparently went through population bottlenecks where we almost went extinct. What makes the Colombian case special is how recent it was. 2,000 years ago, Rome ruled the Mediterranean. The Han dynasty controlled China. These weren't primitive times. Yet an entire population could still vanish without historical record, known only through their DNA. The study also highlights Colombia's crucial role in American prehistory. Sitting at the narrow connection between Central and South America, the region funneled every human migration into the southern continent. It was literally the gateway to a new world. Yet we're only beginning to understand its complex history. Future research will likely reveal even more surprises. The team has identified priority areas for investigation, including Western Colombia, Venezuela, and Ecuador. Each new ancient genome could reveal another ghost population, another lost branch of humanity. There's something deeply unsettling about the idea of a ghost population. These were real people with names, languages, cultures, children. They laughed and loved and lived full lives. Yet they left no descendants, no genetic legacy, no one to remember them. If not for advanced DNA technology, we would never have known they existed. It makes you wonder about our own future. Will our descendants look back at us the way we look at the Colombian ghost population? Will they extract our DNA from ancient bones and marvel at how we too vanished without a trace? Or will we be the ones who survive, who pass on our genes to future generations while other lineages fade away? The Colombian discovery is barely 48 hours old, but it's already forcing archaeologists to reconsider everything they thought they knew about early American settlement. Textbooks will need rewriting, museum displays will need updating. Our entire picture of how humans spread across the globe has become more complex, and perhaps that's the real lesson. Human history isn't a simple story of progress and expansion. It's a tangled web of migrations and extinctions, successes and failures, populations that thrived and populations that vanished. We're not inevitable. We're not the end point of evolution. We're just another experiment, hoping we don't become ghosts ourselves. The mountains of Colombia kept this secret for 6,000 years. What other secrets are still buried out there? What other ghost populations await discovery? Every ancient skeleton could rewrite history. Every DNA sample could reveal another lost world. We think we know our past. We think we understand where we came from. But if an entire population could live for 4,000 years and disappear without a trace, what else have we missed? What other ghosts are waiting to be found?